Results from the Idaho Spending Index reveal that only 2 in 5 Republicans voted for smaller government, less spending, and transparent budgeting more than half of the time this year. Worse yet, 24 Republicans garnered scores worse than the lowest-ranking Democrat, Senator Melissa Wintrow of Boise. This leaves us with one very important question. Is fiscal conservatism dead in the state of Idaho? To answer this question, we must understand how to measure fiscal conservatism and how lawmakers perform based on these metrics. Ultimately, this will paint a picture of how the death of this foundational conservative ideology has both financial and social impacts on the gem state. As it stands, the Idaho Freedom Foundation is the only organization measuring fiscal conservatism in the state. Our metrics are not as radical or libertarian as some opponents may suggest. Traditionally, fiscal conservatism was based on principles that used to be the very foundation of the Republican platform. Principles like small government, laissez-faire economics, low taxes, less spending, personal agency, and the free market. These are principles that may seem familiar to Reagan Republicans who once believed that government was not the answer to all of our problems. The spending index builds on these very principles, asking questions about how a budget reflects the proper role of government, the Constitution, and federal control of the state. It also looks into whether the budget is growing faster than the rate of inflation, expands the size of bureaucracy, and establishes more permanent spending obligations. Finally, it looks for transparent budgeting and issues where big spending is hidden and temporary funds are being used for ongoing projects. Some of the most common metrics highlighted in the budget this year include whether this budget enacts powers and activities that extend beyond the proper role of government, or instead, if it fulfills the proper role of government. Whether this budget incurs any wasteful spending including new line items, or if this budget contains any provisions that serve to reduce spending where possible. Finally, we asked if a budget perpetuates or expands state dependence on federal dollars, thereby violating the principles of federalism. Conversely, we note attempts to reduce the amount of federal dollars used to balance this budget. Keep in mind that these metrics do consider opportunities where the government sought to constrain funding or invest in projects that would have ongoing positive budget impacts. These measures might include paying off debt or cutting full-time staff. With these metrics in mind, IFF provides a true scientific measurement of how fiscally conservative lawmakers are on budget issues, but unfortunately, the 2023 legislature didn't fare too well. This chart compares lawmakers' scores on the Idaho Freedom Index, which strictly sticks to non-education related social issues, to their scores on the Spending Index. What is interesting is that on the Spending Index, we see that Republicans are more distinct in their positions than Democrats, with Democrats falling at the bottom of the index. On spending issues, however, we see that distinction all but disappear. Nearly half of Republicans have voting behavior that ranks among the Democrats. Some would argue that this is because the Democrats voted against some already bad bills in the interest of spending more money. This is somewhat true, but not enough to explain the difference between the scores. For example, the 9 lawmakers at the bottom of the spending index voted in favor of every single budget bill that received a non-zero score, effectively rubber stamping whatever comes out of the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee. 3 of these lawmakers are in leadership, including Senator Abby Lee, Senate Pro Temp Chuck Winder, and Representative Dustin Manwaring. With leadership scoring so low on the index, we see that there are cultural effects in the 2 chambers as well. The next chart shows the difference between the House and the Senate. The Senate is notably bipolar, with their voting behavior on the budget and social issues when compared to the House. For years, former Senator Christy Zito was the lone conservative in the Senate. But the 2022 election changed the makeup of the body, creating divergence we see today. This divergence is in opposition to the establishment control within the chamber, drifting away from voting for budgets regardless of the merits of the bill. As it stands, a lack of fiscal conservatism in the legislature allows for the rubber stamping of very bad proposals that have severe impacts on the gem state. Low fiscal conservatism allows for bad budgets to sail through the legislature and creates roadblocks for good budgets even to make it to the floor. Because of this culture, Idahoans have to pay for programs like a Medicaid system that funds about 140,000 ineligible people, a liquor division budget that was killed, then came back, nearly $500,000 larger, a $28 million program that provides basically free and reduced price childcare with Biden COVID funds, $3.5 billion thrown into the education system with stagnating or declining performance, and a budget that funds abortion and transgender health care through the WWAMI medical education program. Truly, there is no such thing as a distinction between fiscal and social conservatives in politics. Just because a politician is anti-abortion and pro-gun doesn't make them a conservative. In Washington, D.C. and in Idaho, there are few examples of the conservative Republicans that believed that government was not the answer to all of our problems, that taxpayers should keep more of the money that they earn, and that funding bad ideas is just as bad as enshrining them in a policy bill. In closing, fiscal conservatism is in danger of extinction, but it's not dead yet. There is an awakening in Idaho that seeks to return our state to the original tenets of true whole-grain conservatism that Idahoans believe in. However, most of our current legislators are not conservative, funding the very principles that they purport to oppose when speaking at your local town hall. If constituents are left unaware of what their lawmakers are truly voting for, then the Gem State's veer toward leftism will remain unchecked. With the spending index, the Idaho Freedom Foundation is on a mission to objectively measure conservatism in our government and help you, the constituents, stay informed on these issues. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays, bill ratings, articles, and expert analyses, please visit idahofreedom.org.